Good afternoon. Today I will be talking about navigating officer transitions and the importance of that process with your student organization. My name is Taylor Sandoval Mendoza, and I'm the Assistant Director for Leadership and Greek Life in our Center for Student Development here at Texas Women's University. So I want you to pause for a moment and think about your current transition methods. So what are your organizations doing? How are they preparing officers to come into their positions? And I also want you to think about maybe last spring when we went virtual, what did your organization do to help with that transition or to provide an opportunity for transition? So before I get into tips, I do want to talk about the why. Why is it important to have a transition process? Well, it's to provide for the transfer of important informational knowledge or organizational knowledge, to inform and prepare incoming officers for their new positions, to provide a sense of accomplishment and closure for the outgoing officers, to capitalize on the valuable contributions of experienced leaders, to increase knowledge and confidence of the new leadership, and to minimize the loss of momentum the group might have at the end of the year, and to provide a sense of community among leadership and membership, so your entire organization. So when thinking about tips for a successful transition, it is not just passing down a binder or a Google form or a Google folder, things like that. It's more than that. So some tips: planning ahead. Make sure that you set dates for those transitions. Set a date for when your officer applications open. Put that on your organization's calendar. Set a date for when nominations are due. Set a date for when you will have those elections. Set a date for when you might have some meeting overlaps. And I'll talk about a retreat or an all-officer meeting shortly. But making sure you have those dates on your organization's calendar is important. Preferably having that done maybe at the beginning of the year so that everyone knows when to expect that, when to prepare for that, or at least at the beginning of the semester that it's going to take place. Making sure your officer terms overlap. I would say at least a month in advance to where basically you have that incoming officer as the elect or the person in that position who can then hopefully shadow the outgoing officer. Minimally 2 weeks, but try to do as much time as possible so there's time for a good transition and a good flow. Recognizing outgoing officers is also important. That's on the list. Recognizing not only just serves as a purpose for recognition, a recognition tool, but it shows your group that leaders are valued and that they play an important part in your organization. So making sure there is some sort of formal or public recognition at a meeting with everybody just to thank the officers, to give them like a certificate or some small something, just a token of appreciation to kind of close out the time that they served on your executive positions. And then we're going to talk about more in depth a retreat or an all-officer meeting, something that kind of gets everyone together. We're going to talk about goal setting. We're going to make sure that we pass on important information. And if you can't have at least a separate retreat, I would say at least have 3 or 4 of your all-officer meetings overlapped where you have incoming and outgoing officers together. So when thinking about this retreat or all officer meetings, here's a sample agenda for topics and things that you should include or you might want to include. Of course, you might have other things that you think are really important, but making sure you set some sort of agenda for each meeting or for this one officer retreat. Of course, these times can all be adjusted. It's just a sample. You can change it up any way that you want. I would also say I'm going to talk to you about kind of engaging students virtually and how that might change your agenda, your timeline, how long you have this meeting, things like that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more too. But this is just an example of something you could use if you are looking to have a retreat or an all officer meeting. So you definitely want to cover some general policies and procedures. You want to do some get to know you activities at this time. That's why it's good to have welcomes and introductions. With general policies and procedures, those are some things that you might want to cover, the annual requirements that your university requires. So for TWU, obviously we have an annual risk management training each fall. We have our charter renewals each spring. You might want to talk about how to update your roster through Pioneer Engage and utilizing that system. That could be something you go over during this all officer retreat. And then, of course, talking about the reservation process and what that looks like right now during the pandemic. There's even an extra step if you're trying to plan an in-person event to get approval before you can actually book a room on campus. Of course, you want to have some time for incoming and outgoing officers to have one-on-one discussions, and I will give you or show you where you can find some worksheets that they can use together to kind of talk through and make sure that they have a plan for what they're covering, to make sure it's important and that each of them will provide the information needed for the new officer to make sure that they're successful and they can get their questions answered. The goal setting session, we're going to go into more depth, but we're going to talk about creating SMART goals for your organization and what that looks like and what that means. And then you also, during some sort of goal setting session, you want to take time to reflect on last year's goals or initiatives or things you guys were really working towards, and think about, reflect on the process of the progress that you made. Where were you at? Did you meet those goals? Should that be something you focus on this upcoming year to continue that? So on and so forth. Make sure you have time to reflect on past goals. And then, of course, a farewell and another congratulations to your incoming officers, and maybe, like I said, another kind of recognition for those outgoing officers. So thinking about SMART goals. SMART goals, it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So the S in SMART for specific, your goal should be as specific as possible and answer the following questions. What is your goal? How often or how much? Where will it take place? Your goal should be measurable. How will you measure your goal? Measurement will give you a specific feedback and hold you a little bit more accountable. The A in SMART is attainable or achievable. Goals should push you, but it is important that they are achievable. Are your goals attainable? Which also goes into the next feature of a SMART goal is being realistic. Your goal needs to make sure that there's a time frame and that it's realistic for the goal you have established. And of course, mentioning that the last one, timely. So do you have a time frame listed for your SMART goal? And that'll help also keep you accountable and motivated, because you need to have all of these things into a goal to make sure that you actually understand when and how you reach that goal, but making sure that it's realistic so you can continue being motivated. So here's some examples. So this is an example of making a goal more specific. We're going to go through each letter of SMART. So specific. Say this is your goal. We're going to connect with various community members to see where our fundraiser can make the most impact. That's a great goal, but let's make that more specific. So for example, we're going to connect with the food pantries manager to see where our fundraiser can make the most impact. Or we're going to seek the music business organizations and the artist coalition to support or to co-sponsor our festival. Much more specific, you know who you're going to be reaching out to, and not just saying various community members. You actually have ideas and thoughts and people in mind when you're going to reach out to them. So examples of measurable goals. So moving on to that measurable piece. We're going to publicize the club rugby team's exhibition game in the quad. It's a good goal too. You want to advertise an event, but let's make it more measurable. So we're going to advertise on social media, spread flyers, and make phone calls to help publicize the rugby team's exhibition game. So you're putting a little bit more thought into it. That's really more specific, but getting even more measurable is putting some numbers or a timeline to it. So we're going to advertise on social media for 1 week. That's that time frame. Post 50 flyers in all of the classroom buildings and make 10 phone calls to help publicize the rugby team's exhibition game. So that's really making it more specific. That's adding a time frame and measurable, because you'll know you've met that goal if you posted 50 flyers, if you each made 10 phone calls. That's when you'll know you've met that goal. So examples of action-oriented or that attainable or achievable goal. So here's our goal: lobby for more locally grown food in the dining halls. The actionable or attainable goal would be to collect 1,000 petition signatures from students, sit down and meet with the cafeteria manager, sit down with the student body president, present research to administrators on costs and benefits, and discuss vending possibilities with local farmers and growers in order to serve more locally grown food in the dining halls. Which I think that's a lot of steps into it, but it does put some measurable numbers to your goal, and it also is very specific. So realistic goals. Here's the example: collect 1,000 petition signatures from students in favor of serving locally grown produce in the cafeteria. Something that might sound scary to some, right? We're going to go in, we're going to get 1,000 signatures. But if you break it down and make it sound more realistic for everyone, each member can collect 30 petition signatures from students in favor of serving locally grown produce in the cafeteria. That might be more realistic for everyone because it breaks it down to something that's more manageable, more achievable, and more realistic, because I can go and get 30 signatures on my own when someone else can get 30 signatures. And if you add a time frame to that, which we'll get to next, but once you add a time frame to that, then you'll really know, okay, within the next month or the next week or this semester, we'll be able to accomplish that really well. Timely goals. So each of us will call 8 people a day for 3 days about the rugby match. Or each of us will gather 30 signatures a week for 4 weeks to petition for the locally grown food in the cafeteria. So making sure you add some time frame of when do you want to do or accomplish this goal by. 4 weeks, 3 days for these examples. So getting back into that overall meeting agenda, we talked about that goal setting session. I think it's important to also think about how you reach those goals. So hopefully through setting a SMART goal and really thinking through it, you also are starting to think about, okay, how can we get to those goals? Is there anything available on our campus that could help us get there quicker or just help support us as we try to reach these goals? So making sure you share any opportunity with funding, like from SGA, they provide funding for programs, funding for, what is it called? Promotional items, things like that. Making sure you understand potential venues, any other marketing opportunities. How can we market this on campus, virtually? How can we reach the students or the audience that we're trying to reach with these goals? So engaging in a virtual space. Think about how you can adapt your officer retreats, officer meetings to a virtual space using Zoom, Google Meets, some sort of online platform. That's what we've all been doing currently. So hopefully you've had some opportunities to test different things and try to engage your members and your officers in various capacities. But I kind of brainstormed and thought about some ways that I've seen other organizations try, and things that I felt like were fun or that worked. So, making sure you think about creating polls or activities so that it is a little bit more interactive. When you're using Zoom or other video platforms, you might want to make sure when you're setting up the meeting, you have to schedule those polls to come up, things like that. You have to manage that through the settings. But if you don't have Zoom and you're using something that is just straight video platform where you could just share your screen, try looking into Poll Everywhere. It is a website. It is free. You can use Kahoot, which is more game style. I know I've seen a lot of people do that for trivia, things of that nature. So making sure you think about, if I am going to have something, how can I get feedback from our members or from our officers that maybe they might be too nervous to talk about at first, but if they see how everyone's feeling on a poll, then that opens up the door for conversations later to be more productive. I would also say utilize breakout rooms if you have that. So with Zoom, there is an opportunity to do breakout rooms. That's where you can send your incoming and outgoing officer into an individual room by themselves so that they can chat about their specific position. But if you don't have that technology and you're using Google Meets, you could also pre-assign rooms and make multiple meetings taking place at the same time to where you can send out a like Google Excel sheet or an Excel sheet that says, okay, room 1, these 2 people are going to be there. Here's the link for it. Click on that link at this time. And so then even if you are in a larger room and you're in the main meeting space and it's time for those breakout sessions, or you want to get them all into small groups, just say, okay, I've just sent you the link to the next meeting. You're going to be in there for 10 minutes, give them a time frame, let them know if they need to come back to the main space, things like that. You can do that through Google Meetings as well, just making multiple different meeting links for that. Another thing that I've seen at virtual conferences, and I've heard from some of our other organizations, they like to play music before you start and kind of have a welcome slide or something up where it's just kind of gets people in a more excited, happy mood. So think about maybe playing some music out loud from whoever's hosting the meeting. You could also even take requests maybe, or even online, like, what do you want to hear in between sessions or when we have breaks? What type of music? You could create a playlist and then share that playlist with the organization, things like that. It's important to make sure you have visuals as well in any virtual space, because you want to have just some different stuff to capture people's attentions, whether you have a video, pictures, slideshow, as I said before, those polls, Kahoots. You want some sort of visual to break things up and not just make it all the same of people lecturing or talking, things like that. I've said previously, you want to use icebreakers and get to know you activities. I've seen some where it's kind of show and tell. It's like, show us your favorite this, or you can prep them in advance to say like, bring something that means something to you, or, it can be like somewhat show and tell. I've seen it to where people have done, turn your camera off, or it's like a this or that version. So like, turn your camera off if you would rather do this, or keep your camera on if you would rather do this. Just fun little icebreakers to kind of just get to know one another, get people talking, get people comfortable. I'd also say, if you have any materials, whether it's physical or not, or you want them to gather materials, let them know in advance too. It's like, hey, I need you to bring a sheet of paper and markers, or a whiteboard, or a green index card and a red index card. So you could have like, hold up this if you agree with this or not. Any sort of physical materials, maybe get that to them in advance, or have them collect that on their own if the organization isn't providing it, just making sure they're prepped and ready to go for that meeting. And then, of course, you want to give people breaks. You want to make it potentially shorter overall as well, because sometimes I've seen, it's all day or half day, big officer retreat or training, but, with being online, people get very tired. You're sitting in one spot, you're not moving much. Make sure you build in some time for breaks, or make the overall meeting a lot shorter. So I wanted to kind of talk about some basic information that you also want to make sure in any officer transition that you provide for incoming officers and outgoing. So you want to make sure that you have your new officers introduced to your advisor. So, it's important to even invite your advisor to that retreat or that outgoing officer meeting so that they're in the loop of what's going on and who to contact and things like that. Make sure everyone has the right contact information or knows how to contact the incoming officers or outgoing officers, advisors. Make sure you give access and instructions to any online platform. So this could be any of your social media accounts and all of your social media accounts, emails, if you have an organization email, websites, blogs, Google Drive, Dropbox. If you have any login information for your nationally affiliated organization's website, anything of that nature, you want to make sure they have access to all online platforms that has any sort of password that they could use for the organization. I would also, in that, explain how to make reservations on campus. Make sure you have that password, that login, username and password, because each organization on our campus has one. So make sure you pass that down to the next officers. And then explaining how to manage the Pioneer Engage page. That would be something that's also important to put for all officers, because there are various ways that they can use Engage in many different officer positions. So making sure that they understand how to do that. And then before the outgoing officers leave, also assigning the new roles on your Engage roster to those incoming officers, so that they are getting all the updates from the university. They're getting all they're getting contacted if anyone wants to join, that kind of stuff. You also want to make sure you share any and all documents. So if you have any mission, goals, purpose of the organization, any history, anything you have that's history, historical, constitution, bylaws, budgets, finance reports, meeting minutes, agendas, any evaluations of events or programs, a calendar of events and deadlines, anything that you can provide, you want to get that to the new officers. Continuing with documents, any position descriptions, organizational charts, election process and timelines. I know we're talking about that now, but there should be some sort of process and timeline either outlined in your bylaws or in a separate document. So making sure that the next set of officers also know when to start prepping for this transition again for the next year. Membership recruitment information and a timeline for that. And then, of course, a list of members and their contact information. So this is old school if you have it on a list somewhere else, but hopefully you're keeping your roster up to date on Pioneer Engage to where you don't necessarily have to keep a separate member list, because they're there. You've accepted they've accepted their invitation to join your organization, or they've clicked to join your organization. It should all be there on Engage to where you can email and contact anyone from in your organization. But if you also have a list, say they've built an interest list, if you've done tabling, or you just know someone was like, oh, I want more information on this. If you have a list of people expressing interest, make sure you also pass that on to the next officers, so that way they can reach out if someone's still interested in joining or getting involved in the future. If your club or your organization collects dues, you also want to make sure you have a list of who's paid those dues and who have not. Make sure that the new officers have contact information for any contacts you have in the area. So of course, your advisors, if you're associated with any sort of national organization, you have multiple advisors that are like alumni or volunteers, you need to make sure they have all of the appropriate contact information and let them know who to contact when. That's also important. So making sure they have the line of know the chain of command of who to reach out to if they have questions for what. Marketing, you want to make sure they have access to whatever organization logos you have, any photos. If you have any marketing or branding policies, especially if you're attached to a national organization, you might have more policies associated with what you can and can't use based on your national organization. So making sure that these are the things that your new officers have before completing the transition. Finances is also a huge thing to make sure your new officers, including your treasurer, your president, have access to. So discuss the financial status. They need to know how much money they still have in the bank account. They need to be able to see that if you have any budgets, if you have any invoices or bills that are coming up that are due, when they pay national dues. So sometimes you will pay Sometimes you will pay dues to your national organization. So when are they due? Are they due once a semester? Are they due once a year? How do they pay that? Make sure you have any passwords to any bank accounts. You want to make sure you get the new leaders of your organization on as authorized users in your bank, as signers for your bank account, and get the old leadership off. That has been an issue with a lot of organizations. So you need to make sure that that is a priority before the outgoing officers leave completely, because you are working with institutions outside of businesses outside of the institution at a bank, and they will not let you have access very easily, if at all, if the organization officers leave without putting anyone else on the account. So it's recommended that you have at least 2 officers on there, and potentially your advisor having access to it. So that way you always have 3 people that have access to do a checks and balance system to make sure, there's accurate information. People are, withdrawing or depositing money when they say they are, when they need to. Have multiple people on your account. Once again, change the contact information for the checking account and share any processes that you have for fundraising. If you get money from anywhere else, if you get donations from alumni or whatever, make sure you share that with your new officers. So final thoughts, when thinking about preparing before your outgoing, preparation, you need to prepare before your outgoing officers leave. And that's very, very important because that will help build the confidence in the new leaders, but also just help them so that they can focus on achieving those goals and not have to scramble to learn everything they need to know, while trying to figure out how the organization operates. So preparation before they leave is key, but also outgoing officers. It is helpful to be available even once you leave to those new officers in case they need to reach out and ask questions. So make sure you give them your contact information. If you're graduating, if you are okay with them emailing you or texting you, whatever it may be available for them, especially in the first few months. And something might come up that they didn't think about and they need to know, like, oh, you handled this. They're going to reach out to you. So think about making sure that you're available and letting them know how and when they can contact you if you do have limited availability. But that is everything that I have. So if you have any questions or you want to think through or you want to set timelines, I am more than happy to talk with you through it, brainstorm. If you have any questions, my contact information is on the screen. The best way to reach me right now is going to be email, since we are working from home currently, and then we can set up a time to schedule a virtual meeting, a phone meeting, anything like that. So thank you for watching this video.